Welcome to all of you who are watching. This is the next part of this exciting agenda we have for you today. I'm Sarah Milliton and I'm Head of Relations and Events here at Copenhagen FinTech. So the FinTech Week was supposed to be physical in May, and then, the pandemic hit and had some other plans in store for us, as I believe it had for many of you. But this meant that we could do it completely online, and we could be global instead. And not only global, meaning that we have some of the most amazing speakers in the world with us, but also to make it as diverse as possible. And I think that being able to focus on what matters, being responsible for the agenda and trying to figure out how to make it as diverse as possible and how to also actually get as many women in as possible has been very important to me. I think for many of us who's been to FinTech, finance, tech conferences, we're kind of a minority. So for me, it's super important to see that we are 50-50 with men and women doing amazing keynotes over these 2 days, 2.5 days. Our next fantastic keynote speaker will talk about digital tech and the sustainable future. She's a regular contributor to Forbes on the topic of green tech and has represented Infosys on the BBC World Service. She's heading up the Sustainable Business Unit globally for Infosys. And I want to give a warm welcome to Jonquil Hackenberg. Hi, Jonquil.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everything is well. Very pleased to be at the FinTech Summit now. My name is Jonquil Hackenberg. I'm the Global Head of Sustainable Business at Infosys. This morning, what I'd like to talk about is really the symbiotic relationship between sustainability and the digital agenda and how one helps to deliver the other. In terms of future-proofing the business, what's really key is being able to join up these digitalization and your environmental and social governance agenda. If we could have the next slide, please. So we are in extraordinary times where we're all obviously joining this virtually, and there is a symbiotic relationship between our digitalization strategy and our ESG strategy. And what we're seeing, particularly over the last few months with the agenda and with, of course, COVID, is that it's not really possible to deliver one without the other. And in fact, one helps to deliver the other.
Okay.
Next slide, brilliant. So the first thing to note in all of this is that you first of all can't change what you don't know, and measurement is key to all of that. So if we're looking at how can we move our sustainability agenda forward at the same time that we're facing unprecedented crises from financial impact of COVID in particular, but also understanding that the 2030 agenda for many companies is absolutely critical, then how do we start to measure this and join the dots together? So we have as a guideline the UN Sustainable Development Goals, 17 in total, which is to eradicate poverty by 2030. This is a very ambitious agenda. We have just 10 or 9.5 years to achieve that. So that's kind of our starting point. And there's a lot of different initiatives across the globe with various different companies who are able to pull all of this together. However, how do we then start to measure progress? And this is where the new ESG set of metrics that's being launched actually next week by the World Economic Forum is focusing very much on a much more all-encompassing view around measurement. Up until date, we've had several different standards, and part of the challenge around sustainability is that different organisations are measuring themselves against different standards, such as GRI. These new set of metrics are more encompassing, not just focusing on the environment and carbon reduction, but as much as on governance, as well as on people and, of course, on prosperity. And the key thing in this sustainability agenda is, of course, that we're also continuing to make money in terms of financial contribution to the world. So if we have a new set of metrics against these 4 given areas, how and why are you able to measure that, and how do we then gain reward? So let's just look at how this ties back to some financial metrics, seeing as we are at the FinTech Summit. The first is around sustainable financing. So governance is very much about ethics of a company, and also diversity, and diversity is very much driving a share price. If we look at sustainable financing and how some of the technologies around digitalisation are there to help advance this agenda, we're seeing that it's possible to now introduce through digitalisation of, for example, supply chains, that you're not issuing the next set of investments unless you've met some sustainable quality gates, such as around ethics or provenance of product. The second area is planet, and the green bond agenda has perhaps been around for the last few years, but this is very much on the rise, and we're seeing this increasingly this year in 2020. But in addition to the green bonds, if any of you happen to have attended the NASDAQ summit last week, you would have heard that social bonds are very much on the rise as well. And this is again the impact of what COVID and a crisis is doing for all of us. So this is advancing the people agenda as much as the planet agenda. And then, of course, in terms of prosperity, then we're also seeing an increasing drive in that area as well. If I could have the next slide, please. So let's take a couple of examples of this and how digitalisation is enabling, in fact, fast-tracking this story forward. So if we look at, for example, anytime, anywhere working, we're all joining this summit remotely. And at the beginning of the crisis, we're all logging in, maybe with a dog curled at our feet, with a cup of coffee, and the main focus of enabling business as usual was simply that people could log on from home. But this trend is changing dramatically. And what that now means is that anytime, anywhere working, if we can truly enable that, it means that we can tap into previously restricted talent pools, such as return to work parents, disabled people, or those who are living in remote locations who ordinarily would not be considered for a corporate job in a large city. One simple example. The second area, of course, is around planet. So if you're travelling less to work because you're working more from home, then there's the immediate impact in carbon emissions, both from a travelling perspective and personal carbon footprint of employees, but also, of course, in terms of energy outpouring from the real estate that's being used. And then the final area around governance that we mentioned is, if we're tapping into previously restricted talent pools, that means that you're able to enable a more diverse workforce, thereby hitting the G, or the primary governance within your ESG. Let's just quickly flip to being back to work, and depending on where you're sitting right now, some countries are moving forward in terms of people returning to work slowly, and we'll see this, of course, next year, we hope, as hopefully we see a vaccine coming. The idea of creating smart, sustainable operations is something that digitalisation will enable brilliantly. I'll give another example here. As we're marching towards being visiting a different company, or visiting even a campus within our own organisations, then sometimes that experience has been painful. It takes a long time to go through security, to then get a password or a username for your Wi-Fi, to understand the layout of the building, to find a desk to sit down and work, to then contact your colleagues, to then finally be productive. So if we see this symbiotic relationship between smart, sustainable operations and digital experience and productivity, again, we're seeing one thing delivering the other. By the use of QR code or digital fingerprint ID, it's possible with just one scan that you get an automatic pass through security without having to go through any specific procedures, that you get wayfinding to take you to a desk. That desk was automatically assigned based upon building capacity and based upon energy usage, and that you're sitting within a mixed skill team environment such that you're able to be productive a lot more quickly. This is something that we're seeing as a trend in the workplace, and it's something that particularly large organisations are looking at. But it also applies equally to smaller organisations. And the reason for that is that the real estate concept, you don't need so much real estate, and that which you have needs to be managed more effectively. If I could have the next slide, please, that would be great. So let's take another example, and this is around outside the workplace, but really very much looking at social governance around circular and digital supply chains. Predominantly today, we are in a society where we take, make and waste. And there is an increasing focus in the circular economy, particularly through the likes of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, that's really focusing on a much more regenerative society. I'll take an example, IKEA. So IKEA has for many, many years made furniture. We've all consumed IKEA furniture at some point in our lives. And then that has ended up in landfill when it is no longer fit for purpose. They have worked tirelessly to change that model such that furniture that's no longer wanted by a consumer is taken back, refurbished, and then it's sold as second-hand furniture, thereby creating, one, a new line of business and therefore a new source of profit, but two, addressing the landfill factor. And that's what a circular economy is all about. Now, how are you able to do that with digitalisation, and how are companies able to move to circular, more digital supply chains? If we look at the beginning of this very simple cycle, so the take, the sourcing, the acquisition of raw materials and products, but also of energy source, that whole sustainable sourcing is very much a focus that the likes of blockchain or QR code technology can enable. There's plenty of traceability platforms out there that can enable this. This means that you're starting to look at, number one, the ethics of the supply chain, the upfront procurement. How are people being treated throughout that supply chain? And that can be digitally managed and proven. And the second, of course, is provenance of product. Is that really organic coffee, as one example? As this comes into the circularity of supply chain, by rejoining different aspects of the solution together, such that you can connect different data, it means that you can move towards circularity a lot more quickly. The use of knowledge graph technology as one example would be something that enables people to move forward faster. We already mentioned sustainable financing and how sustainable financing can be put in as quality control checkpoints before the next level of financial issuance is given. And this is contributing to both guarantee of the ethics and provenance. It's contributing to how that circularity is being delivered, and it's also contributing to how financial profits and the dial will be shifted. The final area in terms of social and governance is around creation and measurement of sustainability through a real-time risk dashboard. Sustainability, or environmental, social and governance, in this decade has to be viewed as much as a risk as any other given risk in an organisation. It's not just about greenwashing, and it's not just about driving an agenda forward to avoid PR crises. It's about climate. It's also about people and how the end-to-end value chain of supply chains needs to be considered, particularly by large players. What we're seeing in trends for a lot of organisations is they have an ESG agenda, and that's great. But now we're starting to see that the suppliers from whom they are procuring are demanding the same standards against that same ESG agenda that they've signed up to. And this is really, really critical if we are to meet these UN Sustainable Development Goals by the end of this decade. Last slide here, please, and then I'll open it up to questions. So this is all well and good, but and measurement is the starting point. If you don't even know where you are and the journey to start with today, it's not possible to move the dial forward. The second takeaway in all of this is that in order to move this forward faster, technology has to be front and centre. And the third thing to say in that is that by putting technology front and centre and aligning ESG strategies with digitalisation strategies, you can achieve both with just one pocket of spending. Depending on where you are in your focus, more skewed to environment or more skewed to social or governance, you can adjust your social and governance metrics accordingly. But none of this is possible without partnerships. And the idea that we sign up to a common set of metrics for both our suppliers, but also for our customers, means that we can achieve this goal faster. This is why it's incredibly important that we are signing up to a common set of all-encompassing metrics so that we're not trying to do bits and bobs here and there. It needs to be a common goal that everybody can contribute to. It's also critical to have partnerships at a strategic level. So Infosys, for example, we have partnered with the World Economic Forum and recently with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to drive this agenda forward faster. Technology has to be front and centre in all of this, and without technology, we will not meet the metrics and ambitions of the 2030 SDGs. Thank you very much. I'd like to open up for questions now.
Hi, Jonquil. Can you hear me?
I can't hear anything.
No. I think we have some technical issues, but if you have any questions for Jonquil, I will please email or put it in Swapcard, and I will look into answering them afterwards. Thank you so much.